They thought she was just the help. They thought she was invisible. In the high-stakes world of New York's elite, Elena was just another waitress wiping tables to pay off a debt that was drowning her. But when Julian Thorne, the city's most arrogant billionaire, threw $50,000 on the floor and mockingly dared her to dance for his amusement, he made a fatal calculation. He didn't know who she used to be. He didn't know that tonight the servant would become the queen, and the king of Wall Street was about to lose his crown. The air inside the gilded cage didn't smell like oxygen. It smelled like ambition, chilled vodka, and Clive Christian No. 1 perfume. It was the kind of exclusive Manhattan supper club where the membership fee cost more than most people's college tuition, and the lighting was designed to make billionaires look 20 years younger. For Elena Vance, however, the club smelled like exhaustion. At 24, Elena moved through the shadows of the room with a practiced invisibility. Her uniform was a stark, unflattering black, a stiff button-down shirt that scratched at her neck, and a knee-length skirt that had seen better days. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a bun, so tight it pulled at her temples, giving her a severe, plain look. She kept her eyes down. That was rule number 1. Never look the guests in the eye unless they speak to you first. More ice. A woman with a diamond choker the size of a handcuff snapped, not even turning her head. "Right away, ma'am," Elena whispered. Her legs burned. She had been on her feet for 10 hours straight. Her cheap, rubber-soled shoes were disintegrating, offering zero support against the marble floors. Every step sent a jolt of pain up her shins, a cruel reminder of the injury that had ended her life 3 years ago. Just 3 more hours, she told herself, clutching the silver ice bucket. 3 more hours, and you have $200 in tips. That pays for Caleb's physical therapy this week. Her younger brother, Caleb, was the only reason she endured this. The car accident that had taken their parents had left Caleb in a wheelchair, requiring constant, expensive care from Dr. Sterling at the New York Presbyterian Hospital. The medical bills were a hungry beast that never stopped eating. As Elena navigated the crowded floor, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was a subtle change at first, a hush rippling from the entrance, followed by the frantic energy of waiters straightening their ties. The double doors swung open, and Julian Thorne walked in. If money had a gravitational pull, Julian was a black hole. He was 32, tall, with shoulders that filled out his bespoke Brioni suit, as if it were armor. He had the face of a fallen angel, stunningly handsome, but marred by a perpetual sneer of boredom. Julian wasn't just rich. He was old money, mixed with new tech, aggression. He owned Thorne Dynamics, a company that bought struggling businesses, stripped them for parts, and sold the scraps. He destroyed livelihoods for sport. He was flanked by an entourage of sycophants, mostly junior executives and a few models who looked more like accessories than people. "Get us the center booth," Julian commanded, his voice carrying over the low hum of jazz. He didn't ask, he announced. The floor manager, a nervous man named Mr. Henderson, practically sprinted over. "Mr. Thorne, we didn't know you were coming. We have the senator in the center booth." Julian stopped. He looked at the booth where an older man was eating a steak. Julian didn't blink. "Move him." Mr. Henderson swallowed hard. "Sir, that's Senator." "I don't care if it's the Pope. I want the center booth. Do it, or I buy this building tomorrow and turn it into a parking lot for my staff." The ruthlessness was casual, almost bored. Within 3 minutes, the senator was awkwardly reshuffled to a corner table, and Julian Thorne was seated in the center of the room, looking like a king holding court. "Champagne," Julian barked, snapping his fingers without looking up from his phone. "And not the house swill. Bring me the 1959 Dom Perignon Rosé. Gold bottle." Mr. Henderson went pale. He turned and spotted Elena. "Vance! The 1959! From the vault! Move! And for God's sake, don't drop it!" "That bottle costs more than your life." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She nodded, rushing to the cellar. Her hands were trembling. She retrieved the dusty, heavy bottle, cradling it like an infant. When she returned to the table, Julian was in the middle of a story, his guests laughing too loudly at a joke that wasn't funny. "So I told him," Julian sneered, swirling an empty glass, "if you can't afford the lease, maybe you shouldn't be in Manhattan. Go open a taco stand in Jersey." The table erupted in laughter. Elena approached silently, presenting the label to Julian as trained. "Sir, the 1959. Julian paused. He looked at the bottle, then slowly let his gaze slide up to Elena. He didn't see a person. He saw a prop. He saw a gray, tired thing in a cheap uniform. "Pour," he said dismissively. Elena stepped forward. As she leaned in to pour the golden liquid into his flute, one of the models at the table threw her head back in laughter, flailing her arm. Her manicured hand struck Elena's elbow hard. It happened in slow motion. The bottle slipped from Elena's grip. She lunged for it, her reflexes kicking in, reflexes that hadn't been used in years. She caught the bottle just before it hit the table, but the sudden jerk sent a splash of the vintage champagne flying. A precise golden arc of liquid landed directly on Julian Thorne's lapel. The music didn't stop, but the silence at table one was deafening. The model gasped. Mr. Henderson, watching from the bar, looked like he was about to faint. Elena froze. The bottle was safe, but the damage was done. A dark stain was blooming on the silk of Julian's $10,000 suit. Julian slowly looked down at his chest. Then he looked up at Elena. His eyes were cold, dead sharks. I am so sorry, sir," Elena stammered, reaching for a napkin. "Let me help you." "Don't touch me," Julian said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the room like a scalpel. He stood up, towering over her. The entire restaurant was watching now. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, pointing to his suit. It's a suit, sir. I can pay for the dry cleaning," Elena whispered, her face burning with humiliation. Julian let out a cruel, dry laugh. "Dry cleaning? You stupid girl. This is vicuña wool. It cannot be cleaned. You've ruined it." He leaned in closer, invading her personal space. "And you think you can pay for it? With what? Your tips?" He grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to trap her. He looked at her wrist, seeing the lack of jewelry, then down at her scuffed black orthotic shoes. "Look at you!" he sneered, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "You're a clumsy, pathetic mess. You walk like a duck and dress like a funeral director." "Please, sir," Elena said, tears pricking her eyes. "It was an accident. I'll do anything to make it right." Julian released her hand as if she were contagious. A wicked idea seemed to dawn on him. He sat back down, a shark-like grin spreading across his face. "Anything?" he asked. The tension in the gilded cage was thick enough to choke on. Even the jazz pianist had stopped playing, sensing the predator, circling his prey. Julian reached into the inner pocket of his stained jacket and pulled out a checkbook. He produced a gold fountain pen and scribbled something furiously. He ripped the check out and slammed it onto the white tablecloth. $50,000, Julian announced. Elena stared at the paper. The number swam before her eyes. 50,000. That was 3 surgeries for Caleb. That was rent for 2 years. That was freedom. "I don't understand," Elena said softly. "It's very simple," Julian said, leaning back and crossing his arms. "You ruined my evening. You ruined my suit. You brought down the aesthetic value of my table just by standing there. So you have a debt to pay." He gestured to the open dance floor in the center of the room. It was a beautiful parquet floor, currently empty. "My friends and I are bored," Julian said, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "The entertainment doesn't start for another hour, so you're going to fill in." "Sir?" "Dance," Julian said coldly. "Get on that floor and dance for us. If you can entertain me, if you can prove you're not just a clumsy waste of space, I'll give you this check. You can buy yourself a new pair of shoes and maybe a personality." The table snickered. The model covered her mouth, giggling. "And if I don't?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. "Then Mr. Henderson fires you," Julian said, glancing at the manager who was nodding vigorously in the background. And I will make sure you never work in this city again. I'll blacklist you from every restaurant from here to the Bronx. You'll starve." It was a cruel, impossible trap. He expected her to flail around, to do a chicken dance or an awkward sway. He wanted a court jester. He wanted to watch the poor girl humiliate herself for his amusement, so he could laugh and throw her out without a dime. Elena looked at the check. Then she looked at Caleb's face in her mind. She looked down at her shoes. Her ugly, sensible shoes. Inside her, something that had been dormant for 3 years began to stir. It was a flame she had doused with grief and double shifts. "Music," Elena said. Her voice was different now. The tremble was gone. Julian blinked. "Excuse me? I get to pick the music," Elena said, lifting her chin. Her eyes, usually cast down in servitude, locked onto Julian's. They were a piercing, icy blue. Julian laughed, a harsh barking sound. "Oh, this is going to be rich. Fine. Pick your song. DJ," he yelled at the booth above. "Give the girl whatever she wants." Elena turned to the DJ booth. She didn't ask for a pop song. She didn't ask for a ballad. "Libertango," she called out clearly. "The Yo-Yo Ma version. Cello and accordion." The DJ looked confused but nodded, typing it into his system. Julian smirked. "Tango? You can barely walk without tripping, and you're going to attempt a tango?" Elena didn't answer. She reached up and pulled the pins from her hair. Heavy, golden waves cascaded down her back, instantly softening the severity of her face. She reached behind her back and untied the apron, letting it drop to the floor. She was still wearing the ugly black skirt and the button-down shirt, but suddenly she didn't look like a waitress. She stood differently. Her spine elongated, her chin lifted. Her shoulders settled. She bent down and unlaced her heavy black shoes, kicking them aside. She stood barefoot on the cold marble. "You have 3 minutes to amuse me," Julian mocked, raising his glass. "Don't bore me." The first notes of Libertango are not gentle. They are aggressive, fast, and demanding. The cello growls, and the accordion weeps. It is a song of passion and violence. As the music hit the air, Elena Vance disappeared. In her place stood Elara, the name she used to go by. The name that had won the Blackpool Dance Festival at age 19. The name that critics called the prodigy of motion before her parents died and the money ran out, forcing her to trade her dancing shoes for a serving tray. For 3 years she hadn't danced. Her body was tired. Her muscles were tight from carrying trays. But muscle memory is a powerful ghost. As the beat dropped, the ghost took over. Elena didn't just move, she exploded. She launched into a solo tango sequence that was so sharp, so precise, it looked like she was cutting the air with a knife. Being barefoot gave her a raw, primal connection to the floor. She spun, her black skirt flaring out like an ink blot, her leg extending in a perfect, high extension that defied the laws of anatomy. The smirk vanished from Julian's face instantly. His glass of champagne paused halfway to his mouth. Elena wasn't flailing, she was dominating. She moved across the floor with the predatory grace of a panther. The tango is a dance of tension, of push and pull. Usually it requires a partner. But Elena danced with the shadows. She danced with her pain. She danced with the arrogance of the man sitting 5 feet away. She pirouetted toward Julian's table, her speed terrifying. She stopped inches from him, hitting a sharp pose on the beat, her eyes blazing with a fire that made him recoil slightly. Then she was off again, sweeping across the floor. She incorporated the tray-carrying muscles into her lifts, using her upper body strength to throw herself into aerial spins that drew gasps from the entire room. The restaurant had gone silent. Forks were lowered. Conversations died. The waiters stopped serving. Even the kitchen staff had peeked out from the swinging doors. Julian Thorne stared. He looked for a flaw. He looked for a stumble. He looked for something to mock. But there was nothing. There was only perfection. He watched the way her feet, bare and vulnerable, struck the floor with rhythmic thunder. He saw the sweat glistening on her neck, not from fear, but from the sheer physical exertion of a master at work. For a split second, Julian felt something he hadn't felt in years. Insecurity. He was the richest man in the room, but right now, she was the most powerful. The music swelled to its crescendo. Elena executed a series of chains turns, blurring into a whirlwind of black and gold hair. She finished the dance with a dramatic drop to the floor, her back arched, one leg extended high, her chest heaving as the final note of the cello faded into silence. For 3 seconds there was absolute silence in the gilded cage. Then, from the back of the room, a slow clap started. It was Liam Mercer. Liam was a man few people recognized, but everyone in the industry feared. He was the owner of Mercer Arts, the largest talent agency in the world, and a silent partner in the very club they were sitting in. He was sitting in the shadows, nursing a whiskey, and he was standing up. The applause spread, first Liam, then the senator in the corner, then the other diners. Within moments, the entire restaurant was clapping, some even cheering. The kitchen staff was whistling. Elena stayed on the floor for a moment, catching her breath. She wasn't smiling. She slowly stood up, brushing her skirt. She walked, barefoot, back to Julian's table. She didn't look down. She looked him dead in the eye. Julian was still sitting there, his face a mask of shock and something darker, humiliation. He had tried to make her a clown, and she had made him a spectator in her triumph. "I believe," Elena said, her voice steady despite her heavy breathing, "that I have entertained you." She looked at the check on the table. Julian's hand twitched. His ego was bruising, turning purple and angry. He couldn't let a waitress win. Not in front of his friends. Not in front of the senator. He snatched the check off the table. "Entertaining?" Julian scoffed, though his voice lacked its usual power. He stood up, towering over her again, trying to regain the physical advantage. "It was adequate for a circus act." The room went quiet again. The crowd sensed the shift. The applause died down, replaced by a tense murmur. "But," Julian sneered, ripping the check in half, "you missed a spot." He pointed to a tiny, almost invisible scuff on the floor near his shoe. "The deal was, you amuse me. I'm not amused, I'm bored, and you're fired." He threw the confetti-like pieces of the check in her face. "Get out of my sight," Julian spat. "Mr. Henderson, get security!" Elena stood there as the paper fluttered down around her like snow. The hope that had ignited in her chest turned to ice. He had lied. Of course he had lied. Men like Julian Thorne didn't play by the rules. They bought the game. But before security could move, a deep voice resonated from the shadows. "Pick it up, Julian." Everyone turned. Liam Mercer stepped into the light. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was in a dark cashmere sweater and jeans. But he carried more authority in his pinky finger than Julian did in his entire bank account. "Liam?" Julian squinted. "Stay out of this. It's just staff discipline." "No," Liam said, walking closer. He stopped next to Elena. He didn't look at her. He looked at Julian. "You made a verbal contract in front of 60 witnesses. She fulfilled her end. You owe her $50,000. "She's a waitress," Julian shouted, his composure cracking. "She's a nobody." "She," Liam said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "is Alara Vance. Two-time national ballroom champion and the youngest soloist ever accepted into the Royal Ballet before she vanished 3 years ago. You didn't just watch a waitress dance, you idiot. You watched a legend." A gasp rippled through the room. Julian looked at Elena, his eyes widening. "You?" "And," Liam continued, pulling out his phone, "I just live-streamed the whole thing. It's got 10,000 views in 3 minutes. The comments are already identifying her, and they are identifying you as the man who just ripped up a check for a struggling artist." Julian's face went gray. His PR nightmare was beginning. "Now," Liam said, pointing to the floor, "write another check, and add a 0 for the insult." The euphoria of the night at the gilded cage lasted exactly 8 hours. When Elena woke up the next morning in her cramped, one-bedroom apartment in Queens, the events of the previous night felt like a fever dream. But the piece of paper on her nightstand was real. A check, drawn from the personal account of Julian Thorne. The amount was staggering. $500,000. Liam Mercer had forced Julian's hand, and the billionaire had written it with a shaking, furious hand before storming out of the club with his tail between his legs. $500,000. It was Caleb's legs. It was his future. Elena kissed her sleeping brother on the forehead. Caleb was 17, pale and thin, his wheelchair parked by the bed like a grim sentinel. He breathed with a rattling sound that terrified her. "I did it, Cal," she whispered, grabbing her purse. "I fixed it." She took the subway to the bank, clutching the check so hard her knuckles turned white. She stood in line at the First National Bank of Manhattan, ignoring the strange looks her worn-out coat attracted in the marble lobby. When she reached the teller, she slid the check across the glass with a trembling hand. "I'd like to deposit this," Elena said, her voice filled with hope. "And I need to wire $100,000 immediately to Dr. Sterling at New York Presbyterian." The teller, a young woman named Sarah, looked at the check. Her eyes widened at the sum. She looked at Elena, then back at the check. She typed something into her computer. Then she frowned. She typed again. "1 moment, please," Sarah said, her voice dropping an octave. She picked up a phone. Elena's stomach twisted. "Is something wrong?" 2 minutes later, the branch manager walked over. He didn't look friendly. He looked like an executioner. "Ms. Vance?" he asked, holding the check with 2 fingers as if it were contaminated. "I'm afraid we cannot honor this check." "What?" Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "Why? It's signed. It's real." The issuer, Mr. Thorne, placed a stop payment order on this check at 9:01 a.m. this morning, the manager said coldly. He has also flagged this attempt to cash it as potential fraud. He claims he wrote it under duress. Duress? Elena's voice rose. "He wrote it because he lost a bet. There were witnesses." "That is a civil matter, Ms. Vance. But as of right now, this piece of paper is worthless. And, because a fraud alert was triggered, I am required to confiscate it." "No!" Elena lunged for the check, but the manager pulled it back. "Please leave, Ms. Vance, before I call the police." Elena stumbled out of the bank, the world spinning. Duress. Julian Thorne hadn't just canceled the payment. He had accused her of a crime. She pulled out her phone to call Liam Mercer. He had given her his card, but a notification popped up on her screen. It was an email from Mr. Henderson, the manager at the Gilded Cage. Subject: employment termination. "Dear Ms. Vance, effective immediately, your services are no longer required. Furthermore, due to the change in ownership, the restaurant will be closed for renovations indefinitely." Change in ownership? Elena frantically Googled the Gilded Cage. The headline on page 6 made her knees buckle. Thorne Dynamics acquires Gilded Cage in hostile takeover. Staff fired. He had bought the restaurant. He had bought the entire building just to fire her. But the final blow was yet to come. Her phone rang. It was Dr. Sterling's office. "Elena," the receptionist's voice was sympathetic but firm. "We need to talk about Caleb's surgery scheduled for Friday." I'm having some trouble with the funds," Elena stammered, tears streaming down her face as she stood on the busy sidewalk. "But I'll get it. Please don't give away his slot." "It's not just the funds, Elena. The hospital board received a call this morning. A donor has threatened to pull funding for the entire neurological wing if we proceed with Caleb's case. They cited conflict of interest due to pending litigation against you." Elena dropped the phone. The screen cracked against the pavement. Julian Thorne wasn't just a sore loser. He was a monster. He wasn't just attacking her wallet. He was hunting her family. He had used his wealth to blockade every exit, to burn every bridge. He wanted her to crawl back to him and beg. She stood in the middle of Times Square, surrounded by flashing billboards. One of them, a massive digital screen, showed a stock photo of Julian Thorne, smiling like a shark. The caption read, "Thorn Dynamics, Building the Future." Elena wiped her tears. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard rage. He wanted a war? He had no idea who he was fighting. He thought he was fighting a waitress. He forgot he was fighting a dancer. And dancers know how to take a beating and keep standing. 3 days later, Elena sat in a small, dimly lit coffee shop in Brooklyn. Across from her sat Liam Mercer. The powerful agent looked out of place in the rundown cafe, but his expression was grave. "He's blocked me too," Liam admitted, stirring his black coffee. "I tried to get you a spot on Dancing with the Stars. Pulled. I tried to get you an audition for the Broadway revival of Chicago. Blocked. Julian has friends in high places, Elena. He's making it his mission to ensure you never work again." "He's killing my brother," Elena said, her voice hollow. "Caleb has 2 weeks before his condition becomes inoperable. I don't care about my career, Liam. I need money. Fast." Liam sighed. He reached into his leather satchel and pulled out a heavy, cream-colored envelope embossed with gold leaf. "There is one place he can't block you," Liam said, sliding the envelope across the table. "Because he doesn't own it. Yet." Elena opened the envelope. It was an invitation to the Obsidian Gala. "The Obsidian Gala?" Elena asked. "The underground competition?" "It's not just a competition," Liam corrected. "It's the most exclusive, high-stakes dance exhibition in the world. It's held once every 5 years in a secret location. No cameras, no press. Just the ultra-wealthy betting millions on performers. The winner takes home a purse of $2 million. Cash, tax-free. $2 million. That would save Caleb. That would save everything." "But there's a catch," Liam said, his eyes darkening. "Julian Thorne is the primary sponsor this year. He's one of the 3 judges." Elena laughed bitterly. "So I walk into the Lion's Den? He'll never vote for me. He'll rig it." "He can't rig the crowd vote," Liam explained. "The Obsidian Gala has a unique rule. The 3 judges have 50% of the say. The other 50% comes from the audience, the billionaires, the royals, the tycoons. They vote with their encrypted phones. If you are undeniable, if you are so good that the crowd turns on him, he can't stop you. His ego won't let him be the only one voting. No, when the whole room is screaming yes." Elena looked at her hands. They were rough from waiting tables. She hadn't trained seriously in 3 years. "I'm out of shape, Liam. I'm tired." "You're a Lara Vance," Liam said intensely. "You have fire in you that Julian Thorne couldn't buy with all the money in the Swiss bank. I have a studio in the Bronx, totally off the grid. I've hired a trainer, an old friend from the Bolshoi. We have 10 days. 10 days? Elena whispered. "That's suicide. It's your only shot." Elena closed her eyes. She saw Julian's face. She saw the smirk as he ripped the check. Then she saw Caleb. "When do we start?" The next 10 days were a blur of agony. Liam wasn't kidding about the trainer. Nikolai was a brute of a man who believed pain was just weakness leaving the body. Elena bled. Her feet blistered, peeled, and blistered again. Her muscles screamed. She danced until she vomited, and then she danced more. They worked on a routine that was dangerous, a fusion of contemporary ballet and aggressive Argentine tango, set to a haunting, orchestral version of Paint It Black. It was a dance of revenge. On the 9th day, a package arrived at the studio. No return address. Inside was a pair of black satin dance shoes, and a note. "Break a leg. Midas J." Elena stared at the note. He knew. Of course he knew. He was watching. She put the shoes on. They fit perfectly. Too perfectly. "Don't wear them," Liam warned. "It's a trap." "If I don't wear them, he wins," Elena said. "He wants me to be afraid. I'm wearing them." She inspected them. No glass. No tacks. They seemed fine. "He's playing mind games," Elena said, lacing them up. "He wants me paranoid." "Or," Liam said grimly, "the trap isn't in the shoes. It's on the stage." The location of the Obsidian Gala was a secret guarded closer than nuclear codes. It was held inside the ruins of the St. Jude Cathedral in upstate New York, a Gothic skeleton of a building that had been retrofitted with millions of dollars in sound equipment and lighting. The stone walls were cold, but the air inside was hot, thick with the scent of Casablanca lilies, expensive cognac, and the terrifying weight of judgment. The audience didn't look like people. They looked like nightmares. They wore Venetian masks, gold beaks, silver feathers, porcelain faces frozen in eternal sneers. They were the silent rulers of the world, and tonight they demanded blood for their entertainment. Elena stood in the wings, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She wore the dress Liam had commissioned, a masterpiece of black shredded chiffon that looked like smoke and ash wrapped around her body. Her face was hidden behind a mask of delicate black lace, but her eyes were exposed, burning with a cold blue fire. Entry number 7. The Phoenix. The announcer's voice boomed, reverberating off the vaulted stone ceiling. That was her code name, a promise of rising from the ashes. As she adjusted her gloves, a shadow fell over her. She didn't need to look up to know who it was. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You actually came," a silky, venomous voice whispered. Elena turned. Julian Thorne stood there. He wasn't wearing a mask. He didn't need one. His arrogance was his disguise. He was dressed in a tuxedo that cost more than Elena's childhood home, holding a glass of dark red wine that looked disturbingly like blood. "I expected you to run back to Queens," Julian sneered, stepping closer, invading her personal space. "This isn't a diner, Elena. These people, they eat weak things for breakfast. You're going to embarrass yourself." "The only embarrassment here," Elena said, her voice steady despite the shaking of her hands, "is a billionaire who bullies women." Julian's eyes narrowed. He took a sip of wine, his gaze dropping to her dress. A cruel calculation flashed in his eyes. He tapped something rapidly on his phone, then looked at a stagehand hovering nearby. "Break a leg," Julian said. But it didn't sound like a wish. It sounded like an order. He turned and walked up the stairs to the central judge's balcony, sitting on a velvet throne like a Roman emperor, awaiting the gladiators. Suddenly, a stagehand with a headset brushed past Elena, moving a large prop. "Excuse me, miss. 5 minutes." As the man passed, Elena felt a sharp, violent tug at the back of her dress. Snap. The sound was small, but to Elena, it was a gunshot. The structural wire of her bodice, the only thing holding the heavy, intricate dress up, went slack. The fabric sagged dangerously. If she did a single jump, a single spin, the dress would fall. She would be exposed. Disqualification for indecency was instant and permanent. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. She spun around, but the stagehand had vanished into the shadows. "Liam!" she hissed, clutching her chest to hold the fabric in place. Liam Mercer was at her side in a heartbeat. He saw her hand clutching the bodice. He saw the cut wire dangling. His face went pale. "He cut the support," Liam whispered, fury vibrating in his voice. "He paid someone to cut it. You can't go out there. If you do the lift, you'll be naked on stage, in front of the world's elite. It's suicide." "I can't forfeit," Elena breathed, her eyes darting around the backstage clutter. "If I quit, he wins. He proves I'm weak." "Elena, you have 3 minutes. We can't sew it." "Then we tape it." Elena spotted a gaffer's box near the lighting rig. She lunged for it, grabbing a roll of heavy-duty black industrial electrical tape. "Tape me into it," she commanded, handing the roll to Liam. "Tight. So tight it doesn't move." "Elena," Liam warned, "this is industrial adhesive. When you sweat, when you move, it's going to tear your skin off. It will restrict your breathing." "Do it!" she screamed, a tear finally escaping her eye. "Tape it to my ribs. Tape it to my skin. I don't care about the pain. Just make sure it stays on." Liam gritted his teeth. He worked fast, his hands shaking with rage. He wrapped the black tape around her torso, binding the fabric directly to her flesh. It was suffocating. The edges of the tape dug into her skin like serrated knives. Every breath was a battle against the adhesive. "It's done," Liam said, stepping back. He looked at her with a mix of fear and awe. "You're bleeding already." "Good," Elena said, wiping her eyes. "War paint." The lights in the cathedral died. The darkness was absolute. Then, a single, blinding white spotlight hit center stage. The first haunting orchestral notes of "Paint It Black" began to swell. A slow, mournful cello that sounded like a funeral march. Elena stepped out of the shadows. She didn't walk. She stalked. She moved to the center of the light, the black tape hidden beneath the layers of chiffon, biting into her waist with every step. She looked up at the balcony. She locked eyes with Julian Thorne. "Watch me," she thought. "Watch me bleed." She began to move. If her dance at the restaurant had been a spark, this was an inferno. She threw herself into the choreography with a violence that made the audience gasp. This wasn't just a tango, it was a physical exorcism. She spun, the black chiffon whipping around her like a storm cloud. Every twist tore at her skin. The tape pulled and ripped, raw and agonizing. The pain was sharp, constant and blinding. But she used it. She channeled the agony into her face, into the sharpness of her limbs. She wasn't smiling. She was grimacing in a way that looked like ecstasy and torture combined. She pirouetted across the stage, her bare feet slapping the wood with rhythmic thunder. She leaped, soaring high, defying the gravity that tried to pull her down, defying the man who wanted to crush her. Up in the balcony, Julian's smirk faded. She wasn't failing. She was magnificent. She was terrifying. The crowd was leaning forward, mesmerized by the raw, kinetic energy of a woman dancing for her life. He couldn't let her finish. He couldn't let the crowd decide. Julian leaned forward. His hand hovered over a small, custom-installed panel on the judge's desk. He looked at the stage floor, specifically at Mark 7, a section of the floor near the edge. He pressed the button. On stage, amidst the fog and the music, a mechanical click echoed. A trapdoor, usually used for hydraulic lifts, unlatched. It didn't open fully. That would be too obvious. It opened just 3 inches. A gap. A mouth waiting to swallow a heel. Elena was entering her finale, a series of rapid-fire grand jetés, leaps, across the diagonal. She was flying. She saw it. In the split second she was in the air, her eyes caught the break in the floor pattern. The gap was right where her left foot was destined to land. If she landed there, the force would snap her ankle like a dry twig. It would be a career-ending, perhaps life-altering injury. She was mid-air. Physics said she couldn't change course. But desperation bends the laws of physics. With a guttural cry that was drowned out by the crescendo of the violins, Elena tucked her body in mid-flight. She violently threw her weight to the right, over-rotating her hips, forcing her trajectory to shift. It was an ugly, dangerous adjustment. She missed the gap by inches. Her heel struck the solid wood beside the trap door with the force of a hammer. The impact jarred her spine, sending a shockwave of pain up to her skull. Her knee buckled, scraping against the floor. The audience gasped, thinking she had fallen. But she didn't stop. She used the momentum of the fall. She turned the stumble into a slide, her body skidding across the floorboards, the friction burning her skin. She slid all the way to the edge of the stage, stopping directly beneath Julian's balcony. She rose to her knees, her chest heaving, the black tape visible now through the shredded fabric, soaked with sweat and a trace of blood. She reached one hand out, not in a plea but in a claw, as if she were dragging him down to hell with her. She held the pose, shaking, bleeding, unbroken. The music cut to black silence. For 10 seconds nobody breathed. The violence of the save, the near miss that the trained dancers in the audience had recognized, hung in the air. Then Julian Thorne stood up. He began to slow clap, a mocking, hollow sound. "Messi!" he shouted. his voice echoing in the silent cathedral. "Clumsy, just like a waitress." He sat down and slammed his hand on the voting pad. The giant screens above the stage lit up. Judge 110. Judge 210. Judge 3. Thorne. The crowd murmured. The first two judges had stood up, giving her a standing ovation. But Julian held the power. He grinned, his finger hovering over the 0. "Goodbye, Elena," he mouthed. But before he could press it, the massive screen behind the stage, the one meant to show the replay of her dance, glitched violently. Static roared through the speakers, making the audience cover their ears. "What is this?" Julian yelled, looking around. "Technical difficulties! Cut the feed!" The static cleared. But it wasn't the dance replay. It was a grainy black and white video feed. It was time-stamped, 20 minutes ago. The video showed a man in a distinct tuxedo, standing in the shadows of the backstage area. He was handing a thick, brown envelope to a stagehand holding a wrench. The camera zoomed in. The face was unmistakable. Julian Thorne. The audio, crisp and clear, boomed through the cathedral speakers, louder than the music had been. "Loosen the floorboard on Mark 7. Julian's recorded voice sneered, cold and malicious. "I want her to break something, preferably her neck. Make sure she never dances again." The stagehand in the video hesitated. "That could kill her, Mr. Thorne." "I don't pay you to think," Julian's voice snapped. "I pay you to break things. Do it." The video froze on Julian's face, twisted in a mask of pure evil. The silence in the cathedral was shattered. It wasn't a gasp this time. It was a roar. A primal, angry roar from 500 of the world's most powerful people. Julian froze. His finger, still hovering over the 0 button, trembled. He looked up at the giant screen, seeing his own crime broadcast in 4K resolution. He looked down at the stage. Elena was standing now. She had ripped the mask off her face. She stood tall, the blood from the tape staining her side, looking like a warrior goddess who had just won a war. She looked to the wings. Liam Mercer stepped out, holding a tablet high in the air, a savage, victorious grin on his face. He tapped the screen, and the video looped again. "I want her to break something." The karma had arrived, and it was being televised. The atmosphere in the cathedral shifted instantly from reverence to a riot. The video on the screen looped again, Julian's sneering face ordering the destruction of a woman's career. The audio was so clear, so undeniable, that it stripped away every layer of Julian's protection. "He tried to kill her!" a woman in the front row screamed, clutching her pearls. "He rigged the stage!" "Monster!" another voice shouted from the darkness. Julian Thorne stood alone in the VIP box. For the first time in his life, the room wasn't looking at him with envy or fear. They were looking at him with disgust. These were his peers, the investors, the socialites, the power players, and he had just become radioactive in their eyes. "Turn it off!" Julian screamed, his voice cracking, veins bulging in his neck. He turned to the tech booth, waving his arms frantically. "I said cut the feed! I'll buy the station! I'll fire all of you!" But the screen didn't flicker. Liam Mercer had locked the system. Liam walked to the center of the stage, microphone in hand. He looked up at the balcony, his expression calm and deadly. "You can't buy your way out of this one, Julian." Liam's voice boomed, amplified to godlike proportions. "This isn't a boardroom. You can't fire the truth." Liam turned to the audience, gesturing to the man cowering in the balcony. "Ladies and gentlemen," Liam announced, "the Obsidian Gala is built on honor. Tonight, Mr. Thorne attempted to turn this stage into a crime scene because he couldn't handle losing a wager. He didn't just insult a dancer. He insulted the art form. He insulted all of you." A low rumble of anger swept through the crowd. "This is a deep fake!" Julian yelled, backing away as people in the neighboring boxes began to stand up and move away from him as if he were contagious. "It's AI! It's a setup! That woman is a fraud!" He pointed a trembling finger at Elena. Elena hadn't moved. She stood center stage, the spotlight still clinging to her. She watched him unravel with a detached, cold curiosity. She didn't need to scream. Her survival was the loudest thing in the room. Julian turned to run. He shoved past a waiter, knocking a tray of crystal glasses to the floor. He scrambled for the velvet-curtained exit of the VIP section, but the curtains parted before he could reach them. 2 large men in dark suits stepped in. They weren't private security. They wore the gold shields of the NYPD. "Julian Thorne?" the lead detective asked, his voice cutting through the noise. "Get out of my way," Julian snarled, trying to push past them. "Do you know who I am? I can have your badge by morning." The detective didn't blink. He grabbed Julian's wrist, twisting it behind his back with practiced efficiency. The sound of handcuffs, ratcheting shut, echoed through the silent cathedral. "Julian Thorne, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit assault, bribery, and reckless endangerment," the detective recited. "And, based on the digital evidence provided to us 10 minutes ago by Mr. Mercer, we are also adding charges of wire fraud and embezzlement." "Embezzlement?" Julian's face went white. The fight drained out of him. "You used company funds to buy the silence of witnesses," the detective said, shoving him forward. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." As they frog-marched him out of the box, the path led them along the upper walkway, visible to the entire audience. The crowd parted, watching the King of Wall Street being dragged away like a common criminal. Julian looked down at the stage one last time. He looked for Elena. He wanted to see fear. He wanted to see doubt. But Elena was simply standing there. She looked up, meeting his eyes across the distance. She didn't flip him off. She didn't shout. Slowly, gracefully, she extended her leg and sank into a deep, formal curtsy, the kind reserved for royalty or for the end of a master performance. It was the ultimate dismissal. "You are not my enemy," the boss said. "You are just the audience." Julian let out a howl of impotent rage as the officers shoved him through the doors and out of his life forever. The doors slammed shut. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the ovation began. It started as a ripple and turned into a tsunami. The audience threw flowers onto the stage. They stomped their feet. They weren't cheering for a victim. They were cheering for a victor. Elena looked at Liam in the wings. He gave her a thumbs up, tears shining in his eyes. She looked down at her bloody side, then out at the lights. She breathed in. For the first time in 3 years, the air tasted sweet. 3 months later, the late afternoon sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Vance and Mercer Academy of Dance, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The studio smelled of fresh paint, rosin, and possibilities. It was located in a renovated warehouse in Queens, not a dark basement, but a palace of light. Elena walked through the lobby, her heels clicking on the polished concrete. She looked different. The severity was gone from her face, replaced by a glow of health and purpose. She wore a sleek white business suit, her hair loose and waving down her back. "Miss Vance!" a group of little girls in pink tutus squealed, running past her toward Studio A. "Walk, don't run," Elena called out with a smile, checking her clipboard. She walked into the main office. Caleb was there, standing by the filing cabinet. The wheelchair that had defined his existence for 3 years was folded up in the corner, gathering dust. He was wearing leg braces, yes, but he was standing. He was holding a file, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Dr. Sterling called," Caleb said, turning to face her. He took a step, then another. It was slow, and it was hard, but it was walking. "He said the nerve regeneration is ahead of schedule. He thinks I might be able to walk down the aisle at your wedding one day without the cane." Elena felt a lump in her throat. She walked over and hugged him, burying her face in his shoulder. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves on the wedding part, Cal. But the walking, that's enough for me." The $2 million prize money from the Obsidian Gala had been wired the next morning. It had paid for the best surgeons in the country. It had paid for this building. It had bought their lives back. The front door chimes rang. Liam Mercer walked in, looking sharp in a navy trench coat. He was holding a copy of the Wall Street Journal. "Happy Monday," Liam said, tossing the paper onto Caleb's desk. "Thought you might want a souvenir." Elena looked down at the front page. The fall of Thorne, billionaire sentenced to 12 years. Julian Thorne was sentenced today in federal court. Following the seizure of his assets to pay restitution to shareholders, the former tycoon declared bankruptcy. His estate in the Hamptons has been foreclosed. Below the headline was a photo of Julian. He looked 20 years older. His hair was thinning. His suit was ill-fitting. And the arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who realized too late that he was mortal. 12 years, Caleb whistled. Karma really took her time, but she hit hard. "There's more," Liam said, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a bank envelope. The court finalized the civil suit regarding the original check, the one he ripped up. Elena looked at him. "I thought that was gone." The judge ruled that his verbal contract in the restaurant was binding, and his attempt to destroy it was an admission of guilt. Liam grinned. "The bank released the funds from his frozen assets this morning, plus interest." He handed her a deposit slip. $550,000. Elena held the paper. It wasn't just money. It was an apology from the universe. "What are you going to do with it?" Liam asked. Elena looked through the glass wall of the office. In the studio, 20 young students were stretching at the bar. Some were wearing worn-out shoes. Some had the same hungry, desperate look in their eyes that Elena used to have. "Scholarships," Elena said softly. "I'm going to start a scholarship fund. For the kids who can't afford the fees. For the kids who are invisible." She picked up the newspaper with Julian's face on it and dropped it into the trash can. She didn't crunch it up. She didn't spit on it. She just discarded it, like a used napkin. He wasn't worth the energy of hate anymore. "Are you ready?" Liam asked. "The advanced class is waiting." Elena nodded. She kicked off her heels. She didn't put on dance shoes. She liked the feel of the floor against her bare feet. She walked into the studio. The chatter stopped. 20 pairs of eyes looked up at her with adoration. "All right, everyone," Elena said, her voice ringing clear and strong. "Today we're not just learning steps, we're learning how to fight." She signaled the pianist. He struck a chord. It was the opening of Libertango. Elena smiled, raised her arms, and stepped into the music. She was no longer a waitress. She was no longer a victim. She was the fire that couldn't be extinguished. And she danced. They tried to bury her, but they didn't know she was a seed. Elena Vance's journey from a humiliated waitress to the queen of the dance floor proves that true power isn't in your bank account. It's in your spirit. Julian Thorne had everything, yet he lost it all because of his arrogance. Elena had nothing, yet she gained everything through resilience and talent. Remember, no matter how hard people try to push you down, your talent is the one thing they can never take away. Keep dancing, keep fighting, and never let anyone tell you that you don't belong in the spotlight. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Share this video with someone who needs a little motivation today, and don't forget to subscribe for more dramatic stories of karma and justice. See you in the next video.